Are you personally financially wealthy? I mean, how can you pour this kind of money into this, and why this cause as opposed to something else?
Well, that's a good question. And yes, I have, in my banking career, accumulated enough money so it basically at 46 years old I could devote a lot more time to my family and other interests that I had. The more I found out about the Church of Scientology, and particularly the first thing that I heard about Dennis Ehrlich that was of concern to me was this concept of forced isolation.
I should say, Dennis Ehrlich was a member of the church for 68 to 92, I believe.
Right.
He came out in 92.
Right, and he was a very high-ranking member. He was their chief cramming officer at their Florida Clearwater land base, and he was essentially, as he describes his job, he was there to make sure that the brainwashing techniques used by the Church of Scientology on their members were indeed working. A quality control officer in that respect. Well, Dennis reiterated about the fact that he had been locked up in the basement of this Fort Harrison hotel.
Yeah, I'm going to use another clip of that later. He tells that story.
Yes, and the same thing, of course, in Lisa McPherson's case occurred much later. And I personally have been locked up against my will.
For what reason?
Well, I grew up it's a long story, but I'll make it real quick. I grew up in a very bad family situation. My father was pretty abusive to my mother, and she just, for her own protection, just left the kids with my father. And very soon after that, we got into a scuffle. I'm taken off to the police station in the middle of the night in the finest Southern tradition of Faulkner or Tennessee Williams. I end up being taken on a ride.
Okay.
No, on a ride to a mental institution. In a padded cell for that first night anyway. And so some of the things that happened with Lisa McPherson, the bruises, particularly on her hands and arms, were really relevant.
Now, there's a technique that they call introspection rundown, which is, I guess, sort of a clearing of the demons. They don't believe, as I understand it, I'm certainly not an expert in Scientology, traditional psychotherapy. So they put a person through another set of circumstances that will bring them out of it. She clearly was exhibiting some signs, I guess, of a mental distress is the best way I could put it, correct?
Absolutely. I mean, she was in deep trouble at many points during that 17 days that she was...
No, I'm saying before even.
Oh, yes, before, yes. There were signs that she was having some mental problems.
And so she goes into this hospital that night. They come and get her out. 17 days later...
Hospital would be the wrong...
The first
the hotel.
Night. The first night, wasn't she in a hospital? The police took her to the hospital?
She visited a hospital. She didn't stay. She was immediately... 7 Scientologists arrived at the time she arrived at the hospital. They precluded her from having any sort of psychiatric examination because of their disbelief in psychiatry. She had a brief physical exam, which indicated that she was in good physical shape.
Now, there's been some kind of a ruling on that today, that the county sheriff's office, I guess, has said that there are going to be charges filed in the case, but against whom we don't know.
Well, there have been the recommendation by the state and local police, the Clearwater and the state police in Florida, is that criminal charges should be brought against as yet unspecified persons. That part is under seal. It seems to be that this has been leaked out ahead of time in order to put some pressure on the local prosecutor, who, by some accounts, is a little bit weak-kneed in terms of taking on
a lot of people
litigating
the church
with Scientology.
And just quickly before we move on to the next segment, do you feel as though you've been harassed or bothered by them for some of the outspoken criticism you've done?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, they've followed my 10 and 12-year-old daughters down West Cedar Street 75 feet. Not a particularly intimidating act in itself, but it's all part of a process of trying to intimidate their critics. And it certainly was intimidating to her mother, to their mothers, to me. And obviously, the more concern you create within a family, the less likely there is to be continued involvement in the activity that's causing you the problem.
You also told me a story about the New York Times was going to do a follow-up to the Globe piece and that they were going to take an ad out, sort of discrediting the reporter who was doing the story.
Yes, I mean, they've, Douglas France, who wrote the piece on the IRS back in the shadowy story behind the Church of Scientology's tax-exempt status back in March, the Lisa McPherson piece a week ago on the front page in the paper, and this piece about me, they have decided that the only way to deal with the New York Times is to attack the messenger, which is traditional. The reporter is the messenger.
Okay.
And
all right, well, we're going to speak to a reporter and a couple of other people in just a minute.
Okay.
So, Robert Minton, thank you very much for being with us.
Great.
As I said, when we come back, representatives from the church join us, along with Steve Hassan, author of Combating Cult Mind Control, and investigative reporter Russ Baker.